Welcome to the Sundance Media Group podcast. My name is Brady, and today we're talking about ramp checks. All right, so what we're going to start with is some things that could potentially happen when you get either a surveil spot check or a ramp check, and we'll kind of explain what the difference is between those two. So we'll go with the very basic right now with the surveillance. So this is the word that the FAA has used, so we're using their terminology. I think we would prefer to use observation instead, but it is what it is. So what a surveil or a surveillance is when they'll actually come by and just watch and observe. They're trying to see what's happening, right? So it's just taking in the information without actually approaching the pilot at that point. They could be someone in civilian clothes. It could be in black and white suit. Who knows? Could be anybody doing that. Then we go a little bit deeper into a spot check. Spot check is going to be where they might ask you, hey, do you have your certificate with you? Yeah, right here. Or is that drone registered with the FAA? Yeah, right here. Super easy on the top, very minimal information. And then when you go into a ramp check is everything encompassing, so very detailed view for them. So they'll say, do you have this, do you have that? Let me see your credentials, let's go over all this information. So it can be very, very daunting, or it could be very easy. And if you don't have what you're required to have from the FAA, then there could potentially be some severe consequences. So just make sure that you're always ready for whenever anybody could potentially show up. So a couple things that they might ask you for, first and foremost, is do you have your 107 certificate, right? This is not a license, this is a certificate to operate the UAS. They'll verify, they'll look at your name, and they may ask you for your driver's license to compare, make sure there's no picture on your certificate. So if you're driving to the point where you're going, you should have your driver's license. When you're flying, you should have this. So it's really not that big of a deal to have both on you at all times. Let's see, what's next? So one of the other things they might ask you for is if your UAS is actually registered through the FAA. And I've got two separate examples here with the Autel Evo and the Phantom 4 Pro. And on the front, you can actually read, these are the registration numbers of these aircraft, right? So part of the registration with the FAA is you must show the actual registration number on the outside of the aircraft. You used to be able to have it inside of, say, the battery bay, so you could stick it right down in here and you'd cover this up. But the FAA has gone through and changed that. They like to be able to see this without removing any parts for the safety of the inspector themselves. So keep in mind, when you register with the FAA, you must have your registration number on the outside of the actual unit itself. Additional on top of that, it's not really required, but we label all of our batteries as well. This is easier just to go through and keep it for our own records. And if the inspector was to come out for any reason and say, hey, I notice you have the number on the outside, I want to see your battery logs as well, we can just reference back to everything. So that's not required, but it's suggested. Let's see what else. So the other thing they might ask you for is, do you have your certificate or your waiver, your authorization to fly in the area? And of course, we always have our authorizations and waivers printed out, so we can always have access to them and show them, here's your physical copy. Typically, we fly with a visual observer, and the visual observer would hold this information so that we're not going to disrupt the actual pilot at the time, because there could be safety issues if you're in the air and you're actually trying to show what this is. So if you ever are ramp checked, if you're alone, make sure you say, aviation inspector, do you mind if I land really quick, and then we can go over all this documentation for safety. The aviation inspector will allow you to land. They are very, very friendly. They want to make sure that you are being completely safe. So just make sure that if you are in the middle of what you're doing, that you are able to stop and land and then speak with the aviation inspector at that point with all of your documentation. You may also have the information. It's best to have it hard copy, but we also have it on our phones, on all of our tablets. We actually just use online cloud services where you can actually show the inspector, here's my certificate, here's the information, or maybe here's my Lance authorization, right? Because those are actually all done digitally. You have to physically print it out if you want a physical copy. So make sure you have multiple points. If for any reason the tablets aren't working, we can always refer back to the paper if for any reason the paper flies away because it's really windy, we have something to back it up. So having a secondary way of showing all of your documentation is important. Some of the other things, if we have our night waiver, for example, to fly at night, we have different units that are actually compliant with the FAA regulations that we can utilize, where they're going to strobe anywhere from 40 to 100 times per minute, and they have to be visually seen from 3 statute miles. So there's going to be several different ones. The Fox Fury Rugos and the Lume Cube strobes that were just released, and you should be able to look down in the description, and we'll have another video out for you that you can actually see some of those as well. So it's really important to make sure you have all this information when the aviation inspectors do come out, so that you can basically get in and out, show them that you are very professional, and then you'll be good to go from there. So I have been ramp checked. It is a pucker factor 10,000. It's kind of interesting, but everything turned out just fine because I had all my documentation. There was no problems, and we actually ended up having them out later on in some of our future missions that we were flying, just so that they were able to learn more about this part of the industry versus the manned aviation as well. So don't be afraid of the FAA. They are very friendly. They want to make sure that you are compliant. So as long as you are dotting your I's and crossing your T's, you shouldn't have any problems. So don't be afraid when they come and approach you. It's okay. Just take a breath. They're just regular people like you and me. So that's kind of what I'll say about that. But anyways, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Brady, and hope that you guys will join us next time. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down here, the notification bell to let you know that a new episode has come live. And as always, fly safe.